Here we go. Right, so we're going to do a doodle today that's going to be using a bit of a grid. So it's going to have a sort of slightly more geometric feel to it. So the first thing you want to do is draw a square. You can see I've got my lovely broken off piece of ruler. So you want a square that you can divide. You can totally do this by eye and by hand. You don't have to be a ruler person if you haven't got one. It's not a problem, but you just want to do a roughly even square. Again, if you haven't got a ruler, you could always fold a piece of paper into a square. You know, if you fold the corner down from a rectangular piece of paper to meet the side, you get like that, gives you a square you can use. And you can fold the square up across and back and forth, and that will give you the kind of folded grid that we want to use. So I'm going to start with a roughly 10 centimetre square. I measured it 10 centimetres, but obviously as long as you've got one that's going to fit quite neatly onto your page, that's fine. And then I'm going to sort of divide that roughly in half. So that means each side is going to be 5 centimetres as opposed to 10 centimetres. So you can do this by eye. It's, you know, doesn't matter if it goes slightly wonky. And in fact, of course, once you've got the idea of how this works, you can do some really fun stuff by giving yourself a strangely shaped grid to work to. That can be really interesting. Does that look even? Yeah, I think that's about even. So I'm going to do, so now I've got 4 squares. And then I'm going to start off with 1 square in this corner here, and I'm going to divide that in half again. So it's going to be, so because I've gone down to 5 centimetres, it's going to be 2.5, but you can eyeball it. You want to roughly get another sort of grid pattern. And I'm going to kind of, now that this one's measured, when it comes to the other ones, I can get away probably without using my ruler and just sort of like roughly following the lines in. So then I'm going to draw in across again. So I've now got 4 little windows like that. So I can see I've got my big, just slightly straighten my camera because that's going to annoy me. That's better. I've got my 4 squares inside my 1 square, and then I've got these little small 4 squares in the corner here. Eventually, I'm going to do this in all the other squares, but I'm just going to start looking at this square here. And the next thing I'm going to do is to divide this square up again, but on diagonals. So I'm just going to put my ruler so it goes corner to corner and through the middle. Like that. So we go corner to corner through the middle. And that's when we're starting to get that Union Jack shape that is also familiar. There we go. So I've then got my divided up sort of grid like this, and eventually I can do that on all the other squares so that I've got the same thing to work on. You could continue, if you're a real straight line kind of a person, working with your ruler and doing straight lines, but I'm going to switch to doing things sort of hand drawn now because I'm not too worried about being absolutely geometrically perfect. If you are the sort of person that is, then you can practice by sort of doing hand drawn, and then you can go back and do really sharp, accurate ruled lines if that's what you feel like doing. So I'm just moving in so we can focus on this square pattern here. And what we're going to do is a sort of triangle that fits inside this triangle. But as we do it, it's going to slightly sort of shift round. And what happens is you get a nice kind of illusion happening between the sort of boundaries where these join up. So I'm going to do the first one. You might just want to watch this and just see what I do. So I'm going to draw a triangle. I'm going to repeat this triangle shape in here, but I'm going to start at a slightly different point each time. So I'm going to bring my pen slightly below the point, and I'm going to come down to slightly away from it again. See, so I've done like a slightly different sort of triangular line. And then with this next line, I'm going to do the same idea. I'm going to start from here and I'm going to finish sort of about there. Sometimes it can be helpful to do a kind of dotting to kind of map where you're going each time. And then I'm going to complete that triangle by joining these two up. So that's given me my first part of the drawing. Okay, so it doesn't look like anything much at the moment, but we're going to carry on. We're going to keep doing triangles inside that triangle, but each time we do it, we're going to slightly shift it around. So the next one, we're going to start, if I put the 3 dots in like that, so I've got 1, 2, 3, and then I can go 1, and then across again, 2, and across up again is 3. And you see that's starting to give me something that feels like it's slightly twisting, sort of slightly moving. And I'm going to do the same thing again. So if I put my dots in to help guide me, so 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then I can go round again, creating that triangle. And let's see, how small can we go? Well, I can do another one, I think. So 1, 2, 3, and divide it up again like that. So now I've got a little tiny triangle up in the middle, and I might just be able to fit one more in, I think. So I can go 1, 2, 3, and I've got a little tiny triangle in the top there like that. And that's sort of got a slightly twisty kind of feel. So of course, if you've got a thinner pen, I'm using a 0.5 pen, you can go in with a much thinner line and you can get even tighter sort of triangles. But I'm going to do the same thing now in this section up here. So again, I'm going to map my points out, and I'd like the lines that I do on this one to kind of do the same thing or meet up with the lines that I've got on this side. So I'm going to, if I do my points first, I want to put a point there, and I'm going to come and use that point where it touches on that side and then move it across again. So I can come in, and then I'm sort of getting almost like a star shape. You can just see it's going to start appearing sort of around the edge like that. Gone a bit wibbly, doesn't matter, I'll just draw it in again. And then I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to move my point round. So I'm going to go point there and point there and point there and draw that in. And luckily that line where I went a bit wrong just kind of fits quite neatly in there. So hopefully no one will notice. And I'm going to go round and do the same thing again, just going round and round, getting my triangle going smaller and smaller each time in the same sort of way as I did the first time round. And it starts to look like a bit more of a pattern. And like that. And maybe can I get one more in? Yeah, I think I can just get one more in just there. So then I've got sort of, and it's quite nice because it creates a sort of effect of, I mean, you can see all sorts of patterns in it. It almost looks like a sort of bird's beak kind of coming in there, or like 2 eyes. It can almost be like a fox's face kind of appearing in that one. So now that I've done those 2, I want to do the one on this side. I'm going to do the same sort of thing again, but again, because I've got a point here, I want to meet that point there, because I'm getting this star kind of shape appearing. I kind of want to keep that star shape going. So I know that one of my lines is going to come to here, because that's where I've got a point, and one of my lines I want to come to the same sort of distance at that one opposite, so that when I do this line in, we should see this sort of star shape just starting to appear in the middle. And then I'm going to take it round again. So this line's got to come up onto this line above like that. And then I can see, yes, that's going to join up there. So that's sort of giving me a start point. So again, right, so this one I've got to move down and round and round. That's it. And I can draw those round and down again, down again, down again, and round. And we're just going to do that again. So yes, that one comes down, that one and that one, that one, that one and that one, and a tiny bit more. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there we go. So now I've kind of got this shape building around this one. I can see I've got this sort of central star that's happening in the middle, and then I've got these 2 now kind of reflecting each other. So that's kind of making some quite nice patterns. So that's quite interesting. So again, I know that I want to keep this star shape going. So I'm going to definitely want to have a line here, and then I've got to definitely take a line sort of to here. So again, that's my first stage of that one. And then this one, I'm going to come up to here. And this one, I can come round, I've got to come to back there, so to that one there to join up. So then I can start in the same way, just working my way around. And as long as I keep my sort of sense of having this star to work to, it should hopefully, my pattern should start developing and I can see where it's coming. So point there, and point there, like that. And that gives me a sort of curl coming round. And the thing about these patterns is that if you do go wrong, or well, not really wrong, if you go in a different direction, it isn't going wrong because it will create a pattern that suddenly starts doing something different. And it might end up being a pattern that's even more interesting than where you would have been if you kept going in the same way. So it's really good fun to experiment with changing the direction and seeing which way you go in later ones and seeing what sort of starts to develop out of them. But for this one, I'm going to keep going around. So again, if we can see this sort of star shape, that's quite a good way of knowing where to start. So I can, then I've definitely got to start in there and move that line and move that one. And well, that should have come to there really, but it doesn't really matter. It's only a doodle. That's the great thing about it. It doesn't matter if it goes slightly off. It's just a doodle. So no one tells you off if you get a doodle wrong. Certainly not me. So we're going to come round again like that. And each time our triangle gets a little bit smaller. That's it. And round it goes. Round it goes, spiraling round and round. Ooh, there we go. And that's starting to build up there. We can really see this sort of star shape coming out the middle now. So what can be quite helpful is you can think, right, oh, I know it's going to come in here, and I know it's going to come in here, and I know it's going to come there. So that starts to help me look ahead and see where this sort of pattern is developing. So then I can come back round and I can choose. So this one's going to come to there, and then this line's going to come to about here. And then that line's going to come up to about there. And round we go again. Now it's just this nice sort of building up of these layers. So if you put a little dot down first, so you're happy with the position of where your triangle's going to, it's much easier. It stops you from getting completely lost as to where you are. And round we go. And yeah, and that's got that one there. And we can see it's starting to build up, you know, something quite interesting happening. And then this one here, we can go round and again, sort of make our triangle. So put my dots in first, so I'm happy where I'm going, because I want to go to there. Actually, that's what was confusing me. That's it. And round and round, like that. And then dot there, and dot there. Like that. And so again, spirally, spirally, round we go. And we are nearly, oops, I've gone a bit, oh, I'll live with that. Gone a bit round, and there we go. And that's starting to do that one. And you can see how, because you started, we're going the same sort of way, it's starting to develop another kind of pattern kind of appearing inside it, which is kind of the fun, slightly magical bit that you get. So let's take that one round. And this one's got a bit off piste, but never mind. I don't mind these things. And we're going to take it round again and disappear it off. And then we've got sort of a rhythm that's happening through here. And then we could continue, you can continue doing this all the way around in the grids, and you'll find that where these sort of different sides match up, you'll start getting a different kind of pattern developing one way or another. And if you want to use some shading in here to kind of bring out some of the detail, I can just use some pencil just to do a little bit of shading. The first thing I might think about doing is maybe like shading every other like part of this sort of star shape in the middle, as that's quite a sort of strong form, we can just put a bit of shadow into that and make that stand out a bit and look a bit more three-dimensional. So if I do it sort of on this side, then I've got like a direction. I can see where my light is coming, and I can choose to do like maybe every other triangular shape that I've got in shadow, or I can sort of do some more random ones. You know, I can play with it and try and get different kind of effects and different sort of bits of areas of this sort of pattern. I can just say what's coming here with this pattern. I can I can see like a sort of pattern coming out this way, so I can do like some quite dark shadow and then some lighter shadow and just sort of pull out some different angles and aspects of this sort of shadow to create forms in it. Just let my pencil kind of pick out the areas it wants to, and then you start seeing sort of different shapes than maybe you were drawing attention to beforehand. And then the nice thing I think about working with a grid like this is, of course, because we're doodlers and we're not just trying to do absolutely perfect things, we can then decide to play around with the grid and sort of like become slightly subversive. So where these come up here, we can start bringing them into curly shapes instead of having all just the geometric shapes. And so maybe we can put some other shapes kind of breaking out of this grid, and then we can play with those and see where they take us. And we can sort of do like maybe a similar kind of idea, but with these circles, if I then put my lines in, but I don't know, let's just put some curved lines in and see what happens. Taking my point away from the center and making it do something strange. And then I've got this half circle coming in here. So maybe my half circle can start to turn around on sort of points related. And then as this comes round, it's starting to do a spiral in its own kind of way. And this is why it's really good fun to go off into the wild blue doodle yonder, where this takes you, because this is not what I was planning to do, but I just suddenly thought, oh, let's try and see what happens. And then we go disappearing down, getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's creating another kind of spiral going that way. So let's try doing it the other way. So can I get this to work if I go that way? And then, yeah, then I can come round and spiral down in doing a sort of curved spiral. And that's then tucking round. And that's creating, it's not a million miles away from where we started, but also it's something that's got a very kind of different feel. So it becomes much more sort of curvy, and I quite like that. I think that's quite an interesting one. So now, can I do it on these corners? That's the question, because I've got to have, I'm going to have to put a line through there, otherwise it's not going to sort of match up, is it? Let's see if I can do it again. So we'll take a curvy leaf sort of shape around there, and then another one, and that's when we start sort of breaking off. Now, which way do I want to curl this one? I think I'm going to curl it this way. So I can come round and it start to look like something. This side looks like it's really curling off and down into distance, doesn't it? Like a sort of caterpillar almost. I love the way you can see different things inside doodle drawings, and they become different shapes, and you start seeing sort of creatures and strange things happening, and they kind of take you off into different directions that you hadn't thought about. So basically we are using the same rules. It's the same rules as before. It's just going round in a spiral that's getting ever slowly smaller and smaller. But what we've changed from one to the other is changing the shape that we're spinning round. So it's the same principle each time, but it's just letting different shapes work in the same way and seeing the difference that they produce. So when I come around here again, that's going down into a little tiny spiral. So then I've got a very different sort of feel. And I could go back if I wanted to, and I could take some of those and turn them into a more kind of teardrop shape to kind of follow that shape round, and just to see what that takes me. So I can soften it again and just take some of those corners out to produce something again different, and it starts to look almost like a sort of plait or a shape like that. And although they still have a rhythm, they're getting quite a nice sort of organic feel to them. So they don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be all geometric, unless you want them to be, of course. And then we can sort of add some softness to some of these edges too, like coming up and round. Because once you've got a grid we can work on, once you've got some shapes to fill into, that gives us something to play with, that we can sort of see where it's going. Because I can bring those nice curved shapes in around there, and with some shading just to kind of make them really nice and soft and roundy looking. And they start to feel like, oh look, and this one, isn't it naughty? Look, it's sneaking out from inside the box. Thinking outside the box it is, but that's what's quite fun with these, because once you've got a grid, it really helps you work out a pattern, but then you can also be sneaky and defy the grid and get it and do something different. Just when everyone thinks that they know what you're going to do, you can give it a twist. I think that's what makes a really interesting doodling, because you're playing with the structure you've given yourself, and so sometimes you're behaving and sometimes you're not. I think we should all do a little bit of gentle misbehaving that doesn't do any harm from time to time. So let's take all these sort of round. Now, just by sort of softening this up, that's becoming really sort of nice and organic and almost like sort of leaves. So how can this one develop? How can this one? Well, let's see. We've got this sort of things going this way. So we could bring them out into more of a curve, and they could come overlapping. Oh, look, that's something quite nice happening there. Look, that's just sort of following that shape and letting that grow and sort of come around, almost like a sort of onion swirl kind of shape. So let's bring these shapes to meet it as well and bring it round and just sort of bring that up, and that's doing something different as well. So can this interact with the shapes that I've got going on down here? Well, yes, it can. Look, I can bring these up sort of, I want to say almost oozing along to kind of meet these ones here. So now these are really sort of changing, and I want to put some more on this side now. So I've got to remember how we did this side. It was this one, wasn't it, first, and then it was that one first, and then we can come round and, oh, I've forgotten how I did this spiral. Oh, it was like this, wasn't it? Yeah. And again, so it doesn't matter if you can't quite remember what you did, because you can always find something new in what you're doing. But I think I've just about got it. So I'll bring that round again, sort of, something like that. And the same on this side. I managed to make them join up this time. That looks quite cool. Something different. And then as we're doing this, you should start to see that that grid that you probably got your ruler out for and spent a lot of time drawing, we've kind of managed to almost get rid of that, because that one can grow up into that and sort of become part of that one too. And that's when it becomes quite good fun, where this is all sort of like merging and moving together. And although the grid is really useful to get you started, you don't have to stick to it. You can crawl into different directions, and because it's still there as like the sort of the foundations, the bones, you still find you've got a nice rhythm with the pattern that you're making. You've got something that's got purpose to it, but it doesn't have to be a rigid sort of decided this is how it has to be and it can't change kind of thing. It can do something on its own. It can be different. It can grow, and you still get a sense of order, even if it's doing something different each time. So I'm just going to come around on this last sort of twist onto this corner here, and that's going completely different as to how I was trying to do it. But this is why we're very keen on things organic. I'm not a geometry person. I'm definitely an organic sort of person, where things grow and develop in their own way, really. And this one, I really like that, taking that across that line. That's giving me a really lovely twist, look, just appearing in that corner there. So that's good fun. So totally subverted the cube on that bit there. But don't worry about if you've got lines coming through, but there's always ways around that, because you can add a bit of shading to kind of soften that line and make that into something different, and work around it so that line sort of disappears into the pattern. It doesn't become too obvious at all. And you can just this area here that we've got those meeting the line, just turn those into curves and soften them round with a little bit of shadow in between. And that sort of gets rid of those lines if you don't want them to be there. And they've done their job now, so we can kind of get rid of them. So I think this has proved that, you know, we can start being with a very geometric pattern, but it's a lot more fun sometimes once you've got the idea of this to then branch out and do something quite different with it. And can you go back to doing straight lines? I don't see why not. Let's see what that looks like. Let's just bring, in the last few minutes, let's bring some of our straight lines back in. Why not? Just so that's doing, again, something a bit more geometric into this corner. Why not? There we go. And I can just whiz that round, get that to curve round. And look, I've got this corner we haven't even got into yet. So I'm going to have this wonderful space to leave you to carry on your own strange grid journey and see where that corner takes you. So this one I'm going to whiz round, and that's disappearing off into a distance. Around we go. And disappearing off into infinity. And again, if you've got thinner pens, you can get those out just to do the last sort of bits. But there we go. That's sort of taken that corner around in there. And we've got one last section here, haven't we? This bottom section that we haven't really looked at yet. But again, you could still draw in a grid if you wanted to. But if you give your grid a curve before you start, then you're already going to create a pattern that's going to do something a bit different because you're not using a measured geometric ruler, but you've still got that to give you a kind of basis to kind of give you think of. So let's try doing that with the triangles again, but just giving them a curve. So they're, instead of having straight lines, they've got a curve to them. There we go. Just seeing something different happen in the shapes that you've got there. And then again, same here, curved lines rather than straight ones, because we've all got some curves to be proud of. Curves are good. And we come round, and then we're still getting some nice sort of twisty kind of spirally patterns happening like that, sort of coming round. And again, I could turn these into, soften these into curly bits and bring this into the whole of the pattern by putting some shading in. And there we go. And I think I'm probably going to have to leave the rest of it to your imagination, but I think hopefully what you're seeing from this is we've got a nice overall rhythm to what we've created, but we've gone off fantastically off grid and into something really exciting. And for me, I think that's a bit more interesting than just doing completely geometric patterns. You know, I think we've got computers that can do geometric patterns beautifully, so let them do that, because we can do something that goes a bit more creatively and a bit more unpredictably. So there we go.